Hello, my name is Daniel Culligan, and this is another video in the series about classical Armenian. In this video, I will give you an overview over the nominal morphology of the language. We will have a look at its various word classes, nouns, adjectives, verbs, its case system, how number works in the language, its inflexional classes, and how adjectives behave. Classical Armenian is a mostly suffixing fusional language with a tendency to agglutination, which becomes a regular feature in the modern language. It is dependent marking in all domains, so in the verbal domain, in possessor-possessed relations, and with adpositions and case. Adjectives show optional inflection, and we will see this in a few moments. Armenian has nouns and adjectives of various inflexional classes. As Armenian does not have grammatical gender, so not even in pronouns as for example English, he, she, it, adjectives are not distinguished from nouns by showing gender marking, as they often do in other Indo-European languages, as for example in Latin, where we have the type bonus, bona, bonum. The inflexional class of an adjective is completely lexicalized and independent of that of its head noun. So for example, meds, big, is an A stem in Armenian, so we have an instrumental metsav, and this does not change when it combines with an O stem such as guards. So the combination of both forms in the plural gives us metsav gortsovk with great works. Now, of course, adjectives are therefore not differentiated from nouns by their inflectional endings or how they behave in inflection in general, but one cannot collapse the two word classes, of course, for syntactic reasons. Adjectives do not serve as heads of nominal phrases, and they may not show overt case and number marking in certain syntactic positions, which is impossible for nouns. Adjectives may be turned into nouns, of course, by adding an article, so medicine, the big one, and by inflecting them for plural, which makes abstract nouns out of them. So we have bari, good, and barik, goodness. Verbs in Armenian distinguish a present and an aorist stem, and they have an infinitive built from the present stem and a participle usually built from the aorist stem that is used for forming the perfect and pluperfect tenses. Classical Armenian has 6 basic prepositions that each combine with a number of cases except for the nominative. They no longer exist in modern Armenian, which uses secondary postpositions exclusively. We will see more of prepositions in the lecture on syntax. Classical Armenian has a system of triple deixis with reference to the speaker. This is expressed by a post-definite article, which comes in 3 flavors. So with relation to the first person, we have a form s, as in girkus, the book, here, where I am. For the second person, we have d, girkut, the book, where you are. And the third person, en, girkun, the book, over there, or with anaphoric meaning. In modern Eastern Armenian, the first 2 have become possessive markers, my book and your book, respectively. The same distinction is made in demonstrative pronouns, so we have sa and ais, this one or that one located close to the speaker, or da and id located close to the hearer, and for the third person or elsewhere, the na, ein forms. This also works for interjections, so we have ahavasik, look here, and ahawadik, look there where you are. And the same works also for local adverbs, both those that describe a location, a motion to a certain place, or a motion away from a place. So we have ast, iser, and asti, all with s. We have there, located in the area of the hearer, eider, and we have over there, so for the third person forms with en, and, under, and anti. Interrogative, relative, and indefinite pronouns are based on 2 stems starting with a vowel, o and I. The first o is used for animate and I is used for inanimate reference. So we have, for example, of, who, and the relative pronoun vor, and we have z and zinch, what. This is, of course, comparable to the situation found in Slavonic, where we have kto, who, and shto, what in Russian. Personal pronouns show suppletion between the nominative and the other cases, as we know this from other languages of Indo-European as well. So, for example, the first person singular nominative, yes, I, contrasts with the dative ins, to me, or the second person, do, you, and the dative is kis. The only exception is the pronoun of the first person plural, which uses the stem throughout the same stem throughout, namely m. So we have mek, we, and the accusative is mes or ismes. With numerals, there are some special features in terms of agreement marking, so let's have a look at that. Those from 2 to 4 show agreement if the head noun is marked as plural. So have a look at these examples here. We have yerku v'kaik, for example, so this is yerku 2 in the nominative, and here we have v'kaik in the nominative plural. We have yerkus havas, 2 birds, 2 marked for accusative, locative plural, and the same on the head noun havas. Or ichorits, hormots, where we can see that we here have the same ablative plural ending both on the numeral and its head noun. So from the 4 winds, from the 4 regions. With higher numerals, if the head noun follows, then the numeral is in the singular and not inflected. So we have I vera tassen karaki, over 10 cities, and we see here tassen is simply uninflected, nothing happens here. If the numeral follows, then the head noun shows inflection and the numeral does so optionally. So we have arakelotzen yerkotasanits on the one hand, so of the 12 apostles, so arakelotzen is the apostles, yerkotasanits the 12. But on the other hand, we have forms like awurk ut, 8 days, where we have no marking on the numeral. Let's have a look at case in Armenian. Classical Armenian has 7 cases: a nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, instrumental, ablative, locative, as they are traditionally called. This means that of those cases traditionally reconstructed for Indo-European, it has lost only the vocative case. And for this function, the nominative is used instead. There are some vocative forms in e, which are only found as an imitation of Greek vocatives in the Bible translation. And this is not even done consistently, so this is not a feature of the living language. So we have theopile, which simply transliterates theophile from the Greek, or lazare, petre, but we also find forms like petros, that is the use of the Greek nominative form adopted into Armenian, also in the vocative function for the Greek petre. Now, however, although we have 7 different cases, no class of nouns has different exponents for all case forms. This means that there is a large-scale syncretism, and we'll have a look at this now. The bare stem of a noun is used as nominative singular, and the nominative plural is marked with the suffix k. In many noun classes, this means that it is added to the bare stem. That is, for example, the nominative singular of mard man has a plural marduk. Exceptions to this are, of course, forms with remnants of ablaut, like ansen person, which has a plural ansing. So there's no form ansung. In the singular, the nominative and the accusative are usually identical, unless we have a definite object NP or a specific object which are preceded by the preposition z, called the nota accusativi in traditional Armenian grammar. So classical Armenian has a system of differential object marking. So I've given you 2 examples here for this, and we will come back to that in the section on the syntax in more detail. But just to give you an idea, we have götanitsik manuk, you will find a child, so indefinite, and then a few lines later, götin öz manuken, they found the child that has already been introduced into the discourse, and this is marked then with the preposition z in this case. Note also the added article n, which makes clear that this is now definite, anaphoric definiteness. There are more syncretisms in the system, so in the plural, the accusative and the locative always have the same ending s. And in the genitive, dative, and ablative plural, we always have the same ending ts. The preceding vowel simply depends on the stem class, so these case forms are diagnostic to determine which inflectional class a noun belongs to, if we don't know this from other forms. So we have ots, ats, its, uts. In the singular, the genitive and the dative, and often also the locative, are identical. So, for example, in arbur, well, the genitive, dative, locative is arber. These cases are differentiated in the pronouns, however. So we have the nominative form yes, I, which we've already seen, and the genitive im, and the dative ins, and the locative is. So, at least for the pronouns, we have to differentiate these case forms because they are also differentiated morphologically. Stems in ya have a separate locative singular, so for example gortsi has a locative gortswoj, and some o stems have extra locative forms, either in oj, so we have dzi, dzioj, horse, and derive from that also the ablative z or j, or we have locatives in I, as in gisher, gisheri. Now, this syncretism, of course, means that although we have 7 cases and 2 numbers, in many paradigms only 3 or 4 cells, or at least not all possible cells, are actually filled with different case forms. So if we look at a typical example, an O stem, which is geht, you can see that actually the differentiation is much lower than the number of cases. So we have geht, for example, both in nominative, accusative, and locative. There's a different form for genitive, dative, ablative, but only one form for these. And in the instrumental, we have getov. That means we have 7 cases, but only 3 differentiated forms in the singular paradigm. And the plural is not much better. Here we have getig, that is once more the addition of k to the singular form yields the plural form. We have getes both for accusative and locative. We have the form in odds for genitive, dative, and ablative, and we have the instrumental in ovk. But as you can see here, again, this is derivable from the singular by simply adding the k to the form of the singular, as in the nominative. So, to summarize, in this instance we have 7 instead of the maximally 14 different forms. K is added to the nominative and instrumental singular to yield the respective plural forms. Now, of course, this looks a bit like agglutination, and we may imagine or think if this is already the beginning of the agglutination that we see in modern Eastern Armenian, a language which is thoroughly agglutinating. So probably this is the beginning of this development that we see in modern Eastern Armenian, where we have forms like gluch, head, gilcher, gilcherov. So the plural is formed by adding a suffix er to the singular form, and the instrumental plural by adding another suffix to this plural form that only has the morphological information instrumental. And of course, this reminds us of what Georgian does in its inflexional system in forms like katsi, katsebi, katsebit, or in Turkish, which follows the same principle with ev, evler, houses, and evlerde as the locative, for example, in this case. So the same structure everywhere in these languages that are neighboring languages in the area. And also notable is that the sequence of number and case is reversed between classical Armenian and modern Armenian. Now let's have a look at number. Classical Armenian has a certain amount of nouns occurring only in the plural, so they do not mark plurality of reference, but they are marked morphologically for plural. This is, for example, the case with aparang, a palace, mahichk, bed, yeresk, face, car, carriage, which is probably a loanword from Celtic, Latin Celtic carus, or ring, law, park, fame, etc. So there are a number of these. Then there are some nouns where there is no noticeable semantic difference between the singular and the plural, as in the case of vards and vardzik, which both mean simply reward, remuneration in general. And then there are cases where we have a free form in the plural, but a singular form in idioms and compounds. So, for example, there is dim, face, on the one hand, so usually in the plural, but in the compound under dim, opposite, so facing, we have the singular form dim. The same goes with for dim yan diman, opposite, or dim danel, to turn, literally, to put one's face. Just a brief look at the later development of this system in the later language. The plural sign k was replaced in medieval Armenian by other suffixes such as v, t, stan, er, and near. And these last two were the sources of the modern Eastern Armenian plural markers er and ner. Where k is still present in the modern language, it has become part of the singular lexeme, so it's lexicalized. So, for example, classical Armenian votuk, feet, is a singular noun foot in the modern Eastern Armenian version. Now a look at inflexional classes. One may traditionally distinguish two basic groups of nouns, those with a fixed and those with a changing stem. The stem change may be due either to the synchronically regular vowel alternations that you heard about in the section on phonology, or to Proto-Indo-European ablaut retained in a few synchronically irregular nouns. Among fixed stems are nouns with the vowel suffixes r, e, u, and the diphthongs ya and yo. For example, in the noun, in the a stem year, of which you can see the inflectional forms here on the slide. So we have ami, amav, ame, etc. So always remains unchanged. Nouns with consonantal suffixes mostly show vowel changes in the suffix. So, for example, a noun like chargement, movement, which has a genitive Hübschmann, etc., and other forms with this varying stem form. Beside stems with this suffix n that we have here, a complex suffix n, classical Armenian also stems in l and in r. Now, an example with a stem change due to inherited ablaut is the paradigm of sister, which synchronically is highly irregular, so we cannot derive these forms from a rule-based system in the synchronic layer of the language. So you see here that swessor, swessres in Indo-European results in Armenian as kuir and care, and derived from this form the ablative kere and kerb, the instrumental, then completely irregular, non-derivable plural form kork, but we can recognize, of course, the plural marker k and the ending s for the accusative and the locative from the same stem, but a different original ablaut variant in the other oblique stems, the genitive, dative, ablative kerts, and the instrumental kerbuk, which again is synchronically also derivable from the instrumental singular just by the addition of k. A few nouns in Armenian show heteroclitic inflection with two different suffixes in the singular and the plural, respectively. So, for example, voten, foot, and zern, hand, are end stems in the singular. So we have a genitive votin, zerin, and so on. But in the plural, voten is an I stem and zern is an A stem. And as we've already said, the genitive plural forms are diagnostic for this. So the genitive plural of voten is votits and that of zern is zerats. So I stem and A stem. These different stem formations are sometimes exploited for a semantic differentiation in the case, for example, of aken, I, which has three different plural forms. So we have achik, eyes, the genitive is achats, so this is an A stem. We have akung, a different plural, which means sources, so this is an N stem. And there is yet another N stem with a different ablaut grade, namely akang, meaning jewels. The opposite distribution to the one of voten and zern is found in eretz, priest, a U stem in the singular, so there's a genitive yeritzu, but an N stem in the plural, so the nominative is yeritzunk. And this kind of irregular inflection was probably also the model for the inflection of a loanword, namely episkopos, from the Greek word, of course, the bishop, which has a nominative plural episkoposunk. Now, as we already said, adjectives do not differ in their inflectional properties from nouns. They may occur before or after the head noun. If they follow the head noun, they show agreement in case and number. If they precede, agreement is optional. And in this case, we have to differentiate between polysyllabic adjectives, which tend not to show agreement, and monosyllabic adjectives, which agree, but sometimes only in case, but not in number. Now, this somewhat bewildering complexity may be subsumed under a more general rule that at the right edge of a noun phrase, case and number have to be marked. This is usually on the noun itself, if it is on the right edge of the phrase, but if an adjective follows, it has to take these markers, which are optional if it precedes. Now, modern Armenian has completely abolished this system. Adjectives do not show any inflection at all. So let's have a look at some examples how these combinatorial possibilities look like in praxis, in actual word forms. So we have pre-post monosyllabic adjectives in the case of meds yerkin, for example. So there's no agreement marking. Then we have medsav yerkiv. We have agreement marking in this case, but only for case, not for number. So case is marked on the adjective as on the noun with the instrumental ending, but the plural marking is only on the noun itself. But it is also possible to have metsavk yerkivk, so with both instrumental and plural marked on both the adjective and the noun. And as I said, pre-post polysyllabic adjectives tend not to show any marking. So we have geretzig, vimavk, once more an instrumental plural, but here on this adjective geretzig, there is no marking. So this is the tendency that we have in this context. And as I said, with post-post adjectives, we usually have agreement marking. So we have wassen, iratzen, irelotzen, for example. So because of the things that have or that had happened, where we have a marking of genitive plural also on the adjective. In this case, this is a participle, so a deverbal form, which shows the agreement marking that we expect in this case because it forms the right edge of the nominal phrase. Adjectives in predicative position usually do not show agreement, contrary, for example, to Latin. So the type magni sunt is in Armenian simply mets en. They are big, no marking on the adjective. This tends to be the case if the adjective is somehow separated from the copula, as in the following example once more, ein adjecurians tsanratsialk. But again here, the adjective is also on the right edge of the phrase, so marking is preferred in any case. There is an agreement mismatch with adjectives when a noun or an adjective is used in secondary predication. In this case, it does not agree in case or number. So here's an example for this. In John 9:32, kuiri itsene kuir tsenelo, so of a blind man. So here we have of a blind man, kuiri, itsene from birth, kuir blind, tsenelo, who was born, blind from birth. So contrast to this, the Greek original tiflu gegenemenu, where of course, as we expect this from Greek, the adjective is marked also for case and number. In this lecture, we have seen some basic properties of Armenian nominal morphology, its word classes, inflectional types, case syncretism, and agreement features. While the classical language continues the inherited inflectional type, the modern language has become a thoroughly agglutinating language. Thank you for your attention.